These are 15 behind-the-scenes secrets from Star Trek: The Next Generation that reveal how one of television's most beloved sci-fi series nearly failed before it began. From Gene Roddenberry's post-it note banning Patrick Stewart to spandex uniforms causing permanent injuries, the chaos behind TNG's production is almost as dramatic as the show itself. Let's start with the most shocking secret of all. The creator didn't want his own star. Gene Roddenberry fought tooth and nail against casting Patrick Stewart as Captain Picard. Producer Robert Justman discovered Stewart at a UCLA Shakespeare reading and brought him to audition at Roddenberry's Brentwood home, and the meeting lasted barely 6 minutes. Stewart left the room, Roddenberry closed the door, and his verdict was immediate. "I won't have him." His objection couldn't have been more blunt. "What the hell? I don't want a bald, middle-aged Englishman." Years later, Stewart revealed in William Shatner's documentary Chaos on the Bridge that somewhere in the cellar of Paramount Pictures sits a post-it note with Roddenberry's words, "I do not want to hear Patrick Stewart's name mentioned again ever." The casting team refused to give up, and Roddenberry finally agreed to one condition: that Stewart had to wear a wig. Stewart arranged for a high-quality theatrical wig to be shipped from London for his final audition, and John Pike, president of Paramount Network Television, watched him perform before delivering the now legendary verdict: "Go with the English guy, but lose the wig." Roddenberry's doubts persisted even after Stewart was cast. Rick Berman recalled Gene coming to set once a week, catching his eye with an expression that clearly said, "What the f is this guy doing in my show?" Today, it's impossible to imagine anyone else as Jean-Luc Picard, but the character nearly didn't exist because of a post-it note. The casting director's wild alternatives LeVar Burton wasn't the obvious choice for Geordi LaForge, and the April 13, 1987 Paramount casting memo reveals some surprising candidates who read for the blind helmsman role. Wesley Snipes auditioned, and casting executive Bonnie Finnegan called him "my favorite person on the tape," while baseball legend Reggie Jackson was considered a favorite by executive John Ferraro. Tim Russ, who later played Tuvok on Voyager, came in as the runner-up according to Rick Berman, and Eric LaSalle, who went on to star in ER, also tested for the part. Executive producer Robert Justman suggested LeVar Burton, and the rest is history. But here's an even stranger casting story that nobody saw coming. Marina Sirtis and Denise Crosby had their roles switched just days before filming began, with Crosby originally cast as Counselor Troy and Sirtis as Lieutenant Macha Hernandez, the character who became Tasha Yar. Roddenberry swapped them at the last minute because he felt Sirtis possessed an exotic beauty better suited for the half-Betazoid counselor. The timing couldn't have been tighter. Marina Sirtis was packing to return to Britain on the day she received the call offering her the role, and her 6-month U.S. visa had already expired. Jonathan Frakes wasn't the first choice for Riker either. Billy Campbell, who later starred in The Rocketeer, was originally cast as William Riker before John Pike rejected him because he didn't feel he had a sense of command. Frakes auditioned 7 times over 6 weeks before landing the role as the second choice, and Campbell later guest starred in the Season 2 episode The Outrageous Okona, the revolutionary business model that changed television. All 4 major networks rejected The Next Generation or made offers so inadequate they weren't worth considering. Fox wanted the show to help launch their new network, but demanded delivery by March 1987 and would only commit to 13 episodes, which Paramount knew wasn't enough time. Paramount's solution changed television forever through first-run barter syndication. Here's how it worked. Stations received the show free in exchange for selling 5 minutes of commercial time to local advertisers, while Paramount sold 7 minutes to national advertisers. The catch was that only stations airing The Next Generation could purchase the lucrative original series reruns, which created massive demand. 210 stations covering 90% of the United States signed on, and more than 50 network affiliates preempted their own shows for the pilot. The September 28, 1987 premiere achieved a 15.7 Nielsen rating with 27 million viewers, numbers that proved syndication could compete with the networks. By 1992, The Next Generation was generating $90 million annually from first-run advertising alone. 30-second commercials sold for $115,000 to $150,000. And Paramount was seeing a 40% return on investment that made executives wish they'd bet even bigger on the show. The per-episode budget started at $1.3 million in Season 1, which ranked among the highest for a 1-hour drama at the time. That number climbed to nearly $2 million per episode by Season 5, and the show still printed money for Paramount. The Next Generation became the first syndicated drama ever nominated for the Outstanding Drama Series Emmy, which proved that a show didn't need a network to succeed. This business model paved the way for decades of syndicated television that followed, and none of it would have happened if the networks had said yes. The Writer's Room from Hell. Herbert Wright, Season 1 co-producer, used one word to describe the chaotic writer's room, and that word was Vietnam. Writers would be given a script to write or revise, and before they could learn what the show was about, they'd be torn apart by the staff and thrown to the wolves, or Gene would say, "I hate them," and they'd be out the door. 30 writers quit in Season 1 alone, which represented a complete exodus of talent. All the original series veterans Roddenberry brought back had left by the end of Season 1, including DC Fontana, the associate producer who wrote the pilot, David Gerrold, the story editor who wrote the TNG Bible, Robert Justman, the producer who discovered Patrick Stewart, and Edward Milkis, who lasted just 3 months before leaving, even before the pilot shot. The villain in this story was Leonard Maizlish, Roddenberry's personal lawyer, who operated like a Hollywood nightmare. Maizlish secretly rewrote scripts at night, removed writers' names from their own work, and sneaked into offices to rifle through desks in blatant violation of Writers Guild rules that should have gotten him banned from the lot. Robert Justman put it plainly, "Maizlish made my life hell. My blood pressure rose suddenly. I've always had a great heart, and I decided I didn't want to do it anymore." David Gerrold described Maizlish as Gene's Grima Wormtongue, his Iago, before later calling him a scumbag of a human being, which gives you some sense of how deeply the writers despise this man. This chaos continued until Michael Piller became showrunner in Season 3 and stabilized the writer's room. But the damage had been done, and the turbulent early years nearly destroyed the show before it found its footing. Patrick Stewart was not here to have fun. Patrick Stewart clashed severely with the American cast in Season 1, and his approach came directly from British theater training. In his memoir, Making It So, he admitted, "I could be a severe bastard. My experiences at the Royal Shakespeare Company and the National Theatre had been intense and serious." The infamous incident happened early on when Stewart grew angry with his peers for goofing off and called a cast meeting to lecture them. Denise Crosby tried to diffuse the tension by saying, "We've got to have some fun sometimes, Patrick," and Stewart's response shut down the room. "We are not here, Denise, to have fun." The cast erupted in laughter, which Stewart didn't enjoy in the slightest. He stormed off the set and into his trailer, slamming the door behind him like a temperamental stage actor who'd forgotten he was working in television. Jonathan Frakes and Brent Spiner came to his trailer for a heart-to-heart, and Spiner's message was simple: "People respect you," which was his way of saying Stewart didn't need to prove himself through intimidation. But the real turning point came when Stewart insulted Marina Sirtis's acting, and she confronted him directly by getting right up into his face and properly telling him off. This cathartic moment brought the cast together and showed Stewart that American actors wouldn't tolerate the kind of hierarchy he'd known in British theater. Frakes later remarked that Stewart became the silliest one on set, which represents one of the most dramatic personality transformations in television history. Stewart himself reflected years later, "I grew to love Jonathan. There was a time when I treated him as if he were the enemy, but I came to realize that he was exactly right in the way he approached the work." The showrunner who hated Gates McFadden. Gates McFadden was fired the day after the Season 1 wrap party, which meant she learned her fate while celebrating what she thought was a successful year. The person responsible was head writer and showrunner Maurice Hurley, and Rick Berman didn't mince words. Maurice hated Gates. He disliked the whole character of Dr. Crusher, and he wanted to get rid of Gates and replace her. He didn't like her acting, and he didn't like her. McFadden explained to IGN in 2021 that Maurice Hurley was the only one I didn't get along with, got rid of me, but that's because I would speak up. If I thought something was racist or sexist, I would just say it. That's not the way you do it in Hollywood. What specifically did she complain about that cost her the job? I kept saying, why is it that I've raised this genius kid Wesley Crusher, and yet anytime there's anything possibly serious, it's only the male characters who talk to him? Which was a legitimate question that the male writers didn't want to hear. Patrick Stewart described the entire cast as being horrified and appalled by her firing, which created tension on set that lasted through Season 2. Diana Muldaur was cast as Dr. Pulaski in Season 2 and was paid more than any cast member except Stewart, which caused immediate resentment among actors who'd been there from the beginning. Director Paul Lynch noted that, The others treated her so bad. She left the set in tears on more than one occasion, and Muldaur herself called her year on TNG a complete nightmare in 1999. The story has a happy ending, though. Rick Berman revealed, "The day Hurley left, Gates was rehired, and Patrick Stewart was the first person to call her asking if she'd return. Dr. Beverly Crusher came home in Season 3, where she belonged all along." The internet united in hating Wesley Crusher. Wesley Crusher became one of television's most despised characters, and the hatred burned so intensely that fans created a Usenet group called alt.ensites.wesley.die, which accumulated over 1,400 topics from 1990 to 2013. Fans wore "Throw Wesley out the airlock" badges at conventions, and the famous line, "Shut up, Wesley," from Season 1, Episode 13 became an early internet meme before memes were really a thing. The situation got worse for Wil Wheaton when he felt personally betrayed by the producers. Director Milos Forman cast Wheaton in the film Valmont in 1989, which could have launched his movie career, but TNG's leadership claimed the first episode of the season is all about you and couldn't accommodate him. Wheaton reluctantly turned down the film, only to discover he'd been written out of that very episode anyway. Wheaton interpreted this as a deliberate message and later wrote, "If Wheaton's star rose, it would have been harder for them to deal with me. I felt so betrayed by that," which reveals the manipulation that sometimes happens when a young actor gains leverage in Hollywood. The most controversial episode in Trek history, Code of Honor, the 4th episode of Season 1, remains the show's most controversial episode, and Jonathan Frakes called it a racist piece of shit, while actively seeking to prevent it from being re-aired. The original concept involved a reptilian race called Talesians, following a samurai-like code, but director Russ Mayberry made a creative decision that horrified everyone involved. Mayberry cast the entire Ligonian race with African-American actors and gave the episode a 1940s tribal Africa theme that played into every racist stereotype imaginable. Gene Roddenberry fired Mayberry during production, and first assistant director Les Landau had to complete the episode while the cast watched in horror. Brent Spiner's assessment was blunt. "It was just a racist episode. Maybe not intentionally, but it felt that way and looked that way." Michael Dorn recalled at a 2024 convention, "Oh God, we're gonna get canceled," which captures the panic the cast felt watching the dailies. Patrick Stewart said in 2012, "I can think of one very early on that involved a race of black aliens that we all felt quite embarrassed about." The episode aired on October 12, 1987, and has haunted the show's legacy ever since, serving as a reminder that good intentions don't protect you from terrible execution. The uniforms that caused permanent injuries. The Seasons 1 and 2 uniforms, designed by William Ware Thies, were deliberately cut one size too small, so they never wrinkled and kept bodies on constant display per Roddenberry's directive that the future should look sleek and form-fitting. Multiple cast members developed back problems from wearing these spandex uniforms for 12 to 15 hours a day. And Patrick Stewart's chiropractor told him he should sue Paramount for lasting damage done to his spine, which gives you some idea of how bad the injuries were. Costume designer Robert Blackman explained the nightmare. The costume would dig into the actor's shoulders, wearing them 12 or 15 hours a day. Spandex retains odor, so there is a certain part where if you're wearing them for a long period of time, you can't really clean all the smell out. Jonathan Frakes put it in terms everyone could understand. If you had an extra donut that morning, everyone could see it, which meant the cast lived in constant fear of weight fluctuation. Patrick Stewart's solution was medical intervention, as he had his doctor petition producers claiming he couldn't wear the tight outfit for medical reasons. His agent eventually intervened with threat of legal action, and new wool gabardine two-piece uniforms were introduced in Season 3 that actually allowed the cast to breathe. And that's the origin of the Picard maneuver, which has nothing to do with tactical starship combat. Stewart explained in his memoir, "Gene was adamant that Captain Picard's uniform must always be unfailingly smooth. So every time I sat down in my captain's chair, I tugged on the hem of my tunic, a tick that Star Trek fans have named the Picard maneuver." The cliffhanger written without an ending. The Best of Both Worlds remains one of the greatest cliffhangers in television history, but writer Michael Piller wrote Part 1 without knowing how to resolve it. There was no outline for Part 2 until the week before. Part 1 aired, which meant Piller was essentially writing himself into a corner and hoping he could find a way out. The persistent myth is that Patrick Stewart was leaving due to contract negotiations, but Ronald Moore clarified, "Early in the development of the episode, this was a possibility, but I think it was more rumor and agent posturing than anything else, which reveals how easily Hollywood gossip becomes accepted as fact." The real drama was Pillar's personal turmoil over whether to leave the show, and those feelings bled directly into Riker's career struggles. Pillar recalled, "When Riker talked to Troy about, 'Why am I still here?' That was a conversation I had with myself several times during the course of writing that show." The episode aired on June 18, 1990, and left millions of viewers waiting 3 months to see what happened to Picard as Locutus of Borg, creating the kind of water-cooler anticipation that streaming services can never replicate. Michael Westmore revealed a fun detail about the production. "My son found the laser we mounted on Patrick's head for the end of Part 1. It cost $200, which proves that sometimes the most iconic images in television history come from the bargain bin." Whoopi Goldberg had to convince them. She was serious. Whoopi Goldberg actively sought a role on The Next Generation because of her childhood admiration for Nichelle Nichols as Lieutenant Uhura, and her origin story captures why representation matters. When 9-year-old Goldberg saw Nichols on TV, she ran to her mother shouting, "Come here, Mom. Everybody, come quick, come quick. There's a black lady on television and she ain't no maid." Goldberg contacted the production through LeVar Burton years later, and Maurice Hurley and Roddenberry thought she was joking. They actually asked if she would really work on TNG, and Goldberg's response was perfect. "I am successful now, and I can do what I like." Brent Spiner reflected on her impact. "It may be just my opinion, but I think we became legit when Whoopi came on the show. A major movie star decided, at the peak of her acting career, to do this show. I think it made an enormous difference to us being taken seriously." Goldberg joined the cast in Season 2 as Guinan, the mysterious bartender in 10 Forward, and became one of the show's most beloved recurring characters while giving the entire production a credibility boost it desperately needed. The Borg were originally insects. Writer Maurice Hurley originally conceived the Borg as an insectoid race, but budget constraints led to the cybernetic design while keeping the hive mind concept that made them genuinely terrifying. Costume designer Dorinda Rice Wood explained the philosophy behind their look. With the Borg, the idea was that the drones lived for centuries and that their body parts would wear out and be replaced with mechanical body parts. I wanted to show that they didn't wear out uniformly. Michael Westmore added context to the makeup choices. The Borg were given a zombie-like pallor so that viewers would know they were seeing a creature that couldn't be reasoned or negotiated with. The life has been leached out of them. Application time for Borg makeup was 2 to 3 hours for TV episodes. But for the film First Contact, the process stretched to 5 hours because big-screen close-ups demanded more detail. The Borg cube regeneration effect was created with practical effects that sound absurdly simple in retrospect. Building a scale replica of a Borg cube's wall, melting it with a blowtorch, and playing the footage in reverse to create the illusion of alien technology repairing itself. The Borg became Star Trek's most iconic villains, which proves that budget limitations can sometimes lead to better creative choices than unlimited resources. Brent Spiner wore Data's makeup for 75 minutes. Every day for 7 years, Brent Spiner's daily transformation into Data took 75 minutes of sitting in a makeup chair, and the composition was Shibui beige base with pale gold and bright gold powder mixed together, plus yellow chartreuse-colored contact lenses that made his eyes look genuinely artificial. Spiner said it took about a year to get used to the contacts. For a long time, it felt like I had Elvira's fingernails in my eyes, which is exactly the kind of visceral description that makes you appreciate what actors endure. The gold makeup came off easily and left handprints on consoles, so the solution was hairspray sprayed over the makeup to fix it in place, which worked but created its own problems since Spiner was essentially wearing lacquer on his face. Spiner's aging concerns became a driving force behind the show's end. I was 38 when I started playing Data, so it occurred to me, how long is this going to last? I looked pretty young for my age at the time, but I thought, if I was 10 years younger, I could play this for 30 years. But I wasn't. This concern influenced the decision to end the series after 7 seasons and transition to films, where makeup and lighting could hide the fact that Data was supposed to be ageless while Spiner was very much not. The episode that sold a flute for $190,000, The Inner Light, remains one of the Next Generation's most beloved episodes, but writer Morgan Gendel pitched it 5 times before anyone would buy it. The flute almost didn't happen because when he suggested it, someone in the room literally laughed at the idea that a musical instrument could carry emotional weight. Patrick Stewart nominated it as the greatest acting challenge he faced in the 7 years of The Next Generation, and the production proved him right. His earliest makeup call for the episode was 1 a.m. with a 7 a.m. set call, because aging through decades in a single episode required layers of prosthetics that took hours to apply. The episode aired on June 1, 1992, and won the 1993 Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation. The flute became legendary among collectors in a way nobody anticipated. At Christie's 2006 auction, it sold for $48,000, against an estimate of only $800 to $1,200, which stunned the auction house. In 2021, the prop store auction saw it sell for $190,000, making it one of the most valuable television props ever sold. The flute was non-functional, and musician Bryce Martin provided the sound using an oak tin whistle in the key of D, which means the most emotional moment in the series came from a completely fake instrument. Stephen Hawking played himself. Stephen Hawking inquired about appearing on The Next Generation while on a Paramount Lot tour hosted by Leonard Nimoy, and the result was the only live-action Star Trek appearance where a guest star played themselves. Hawking appeared in Descent, the Season 6 finale, playing himself in a holodeck poker game with Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. The image of the greatest physicist of the modern era sitting at a table with the greatest minds in history remains one of the show's most memorable cameos and a testament to Star Trek's cultural reach. The Enterprise that cost $75,000 and sold for $576,000 Industrial Light and Magic built the original Enterprise D models over 12 weeks, and the specifications were impressive. The 6-foot model was the main filming model, capable of saucer separation that required precise engineering. A 4-foot model was built for Season 3 with more detail for close-ups, and a 2-foot model was used for long shots where size didn't matter. The total cost for both original models was $75,000 in 1987, which seemed expensive at the time, but proved to be a bargain. At Christie's 2006 40 Years of Star Trek auction, the 6-foot model sold for $576,000, making it the most expensive item in the entire auction, and proving that Star Trek memorabilia had become serious investment pieces. Star Trek: The Next Generation premiered on September 28, 1987, with 27 million viewers tuning in to see if lightning could strike twice. The series finale, All Good Things, got aired on May 21, 1994, to over 30 million viewers, ranking number 2 among all shows that week and proving the audience had only grown stronger. Between those dates, the show survived Gene Roddenberry opposing his own star, 30 writers quitting in a single season, cast conflicts that nearly tore the ensemble apart, uniforms that caused permanent injuries, and creative chaos that would have destroyed most productions before they found their footing. The show won 19 Emmy Awards and generated $90 million annually at its peak, numbers that changed television by proving syndication could compete with networks on equal terms. And it gave us characters and stories that endure more than 30 years later, which is the real measure of success in television. The chaos behind the scenes didn't just threaten the show, but shaped it in ways nobody anticipated. The conflicts forced the cast to become a real family who genuinely cared about each other. The budget limitations led to creative solutions that defined the Borg and made them more terrifying than insects ever could have been. The departure of difficult producers allowed the show to find its voice in Season 3 and become what fans remember today. Star Trek: The Next Generation succeeded not despite the chaos, but because everyone involved refused to give up on Gene Roddenberry's vision, even when Roddenberry himself didn't believe in his own casting choices. And somewhere in the basement of Paramount Pictures, there's still a post-it note that says Gene Roddenberry didn't want Patrick Stewart. It's a reminder that sometimes the best decisions are the ones that prove everyone wrong, and that the greatest captains are the ones nobody saw coming. Thanks for watching. Make it so.